You won't believe what I woke up to every single morning: my assigned parking spot stolen right in front of my face by the same shiny red Porsche that didn't even belong in my space. It became such a routine that I started expecting it, and every time it happened, the anger boiled inside me a little more. Imagine paying for a home, paying HOA fees, and still being forced to walk a block just to get to your front door because someone else thinks they're above the rules. And let me tell you, it wasn't just any random stranger's car either. It belonged to the spoiled brat son of our neighborhood's nightmare, the woman we all called HOA Karen. If you've ever had an HOA president or self-proclaimed queen bee neighbor who thinks they run the world, then you know exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. Karen was the kind of woman who measured people's lawns with a ruler, fined neighbors if their trash can lid wasn't closed properly, and complained if your dog barked longer than 2 seconds. She treated everyone like children under her command. But her son? He was worse. He thought he was untouchable because his mother ruled the HOA, and parking in my spot became his personal hobby. The first time I saw the Porsche there, I thought maybe it was a mistake. People sometimes get confused in neighborhoods with identical layouts and numbered spaces. I left a polite note under his windshield saying, "This is my assigned spot. Please do not park here again." The next day, the Porsche was there again, same spot, same arrogant shine in the morning sun, mocking me. I decided to catch him. One morning, I went outside earlier than usual and there he was, leaning against his car like he was in some music video, sunglasses on, music blasting loud enough to rattle the windows. I walked up and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "Hey, this is my spot. Could you please move your car?" He looked me up and down, smirked, and said, "Relax, man. I'm only here for a few minutes. My mom runs this HOA, so technically, the whole lot is ours." Then he slid into his seat, revved the engine obnoxiously, and sped away like a spoiled teenager showing off. That moment told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't mistaken. He wasn't confused. He was doing it on purpose because he knew his mom would protect him. And he wasn't wrong, because when I went straight to Karen that evening and explained the problem, her response made my blood boil. She smiled that fake smile of hers, the one where she pretends to listen but her eyes are rolling inside, and said, "Oh, don't be so uptight. My son is only parking there temporarily. You should be honored that a luxury car like his even sits in your spot. It raises the value of the neighborhood." Can you imagine? Instead of apologizing, she tried to spin it as if I was lucky to have his Porsche gracing my patch of pavement. I walked away biting my tongue, but inside, I was burning. Over the next week, I tried everything to handle it the right way. I left more notes, each one firmer than the last. I even photographed the Porsche parked in my spot and sent it to the HOA board with a complaint. But the board was Karen's playground. She ruled it, and they wouldn't lift a finger. At the next HOA meeting, I brought it up in front of everyone, thinking maybe some public embarrassment would help. Karen interrupted me before I even finished, waving her hand like I was wasting her time, and said, "This is a non-issue. My son is not hurting anyone, and we all need to stop harassing young people for no reason." I glanced around the room, waiting for someone to back me up, but everyone stayed silent. No one dared challenge Karen. That silence hurt more than her words, because it showed me I was on my own. By the second week, my patience wasn't just wearing thin, it had snapped. Every morning, there it was again, the Porsche gleaming like a taunt. And I, the actual owner of the spot, was forced to park down the street, walking in the rain, juggling groceries, trudging through the dark after long workdays. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was insulting. This was my home, my space, my right, and yet I was treated like a guest in my own neighborhood. The breaking point came on a rainy Monday evening. I had just finished a brutal day at work, came home late, and of course, the Porsche was in my spot. My arms were loaded with grocery bags, and I had to haul them from a block away because I couldn't park near my house. The sidewalk was slick, and halfway to my front door, I slipped hard. The bags scattered, cans rolled into the street, and I slammed my arm against the curb, bruising it badly. Lying there in the rain, soaked and hurt, I stared at that Porsche sitting smugly in my spot and felt something inside me shift. This wasn't just about inconvenience anymore. This was about respect, about standing up for myself, about not letting entitled people walk all over me. The next morning, I didn't even look at the Porsche when I walked out. I just got into my car parked down the street and drove to work. But all day long, I couldn't stop thinking about it. His laugh when I confronted him. Karen's smug smirk when she defended him. The bruises on my arm from falling the night before. I knew, deep down, that no amount of polite requests or formal complaints was ever going to change this situation. These people believed they were untouchable. They believed rules didn't apply to them. They believed the neighborhood was theirs to control. And that was when a dangerous thought crept into my head: what if I showed them they were wrong? What if I reminded them that actions have consequences? By the time I drove home that night, I had already made up my mind. Enough was enough. The very next morning, I decided to try one final attempt at handling things peacefully, even though every nerve in my body screamed that it was useless. I walked straight up to Karen's front door, knocked, and when her son opened it, I spoke directly to him. "Look, I don't want problems. Just stop parking in my spot. It's mine, I pay for it, and I'm tired of having to walk from down the block every single day." He leaned against the doorframe like he owned the place, smirking with that same smug face he always had, and said, "What are you gonna do about it? Call the cops? Call a tow truck? My mom runs this neighborhood. You mess with me, you mess with her." And then he laughed right in my face, the kind of laugh that doesn't just annoy you but cuts deep because it carries pure disrespect. Behind him, Karen appeared, crossing her arms with that condescending smile. "You're being dramatic," she said. "My son isn't hurting anyone. He'll move when he feels like it. Maybe you should try being a little more accommodating to the youth. After all, this neighborhood thrives because of my leadership, not because of complaints like yours." That was it. At that point, I knew I wasn't dealing with ignorance. I was dealing with arrogance, entitlement, and people who believed they were invincible. That night, I sat in my living room replaying the confrontation in my head. Every word, every smirk, every laugh. My bruised arm from slipping on the sidewalk still ached, and every time it throbbed, my anger grew hotter. I didn't want revenge just for the sake of revenge, I wanted justice. I wanted them to finally feel what it was like to face consequences. I thought about calling the city and filing an official complaint, but Karen had connections and knew how to bury things like that. I thought about installing a security camera to prove he parked there daily, but even if I had evidence, what would happen? A slap on the wrist, maybe a warning, and then back to the same problem. No, I needed something they couldn't ignore, something that would shake them up so badly they would never even think about messing with me again. That's when I remembered my friend Dave. He ran a towing company and owed me a few favors from years back when I helped him out during some tough times. I gave him a call, explained the situation, and he chuckled. "So let me get this straight, this punk thinks he owns your spot just because his mom's the HOA boss?" I said yes, and before I could even finish, Dave cut in, "Say the word and that Porsche is gone. I'll make it disappear faster than he can rev the engine." At first, I hesitated. Towing someone's car is one thing, but what I had in mind was more extreme. Still, the idea burned in my head and grew bigger every second. The next morning, like clockwork, the Porsche was there again, parked perfectly in the middle of my spot as if mocking me. I snapped a photo on my phone, sent it to Dave, and said, "Today." Within 15 minutes, I heard the low rumble of his tow truck coming down the street. My heart pounded as he backed it up, dropped the chains, and began hooking that shiny Porsche up to the truck. The sound of metal clanking echoed through the lot, and neighbors peeked through their curtains like kids watching fireworks. In less than 5 minutes, the Porsche was lifted, tilted, and secured on the bed of the truck. It was almost too easy. Dave grinned at me and said, "So, impound lot or scrapyard?" Scrapyard. The word flashed in my brain like a neon sign. I thought about all those mornings, all the humiliation, all the disrespect. I thought about Karen brushing me off, about her son laughing in my face. And then I said it out loud, scrapyard. Dave raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You got it." And with that, he drove away, the Porsche bouncing on the back of the truck like a captured beast finally being hauled off to face its fate. When we got to the scrapyard, Dave's buddy was waiting. He owed Dave a favor, so the rules bent a little for us. The Porsche wasn't going to be legally destroyed since that required a pile of paperwork, but we made sure it looked like it had been through hell. The yard workers were more than happy to help, grinning as they gave the car a little, special treatment. By the time we were finished, the once flawless red Porsche looked like it had gone 10 rounds in a demolition derby. The windshield was cracked, deep scratches ran along the doors, the mirrors were snapped off, and the shine that once made it a status symbol was gone. In its place stood nothing more than a beat-up, worthless husk. Looking at it, I felt something inside me finally relax. It wasn't just about the car, it was about sending a message. Later that morning, as the sun climbed higher, the inevitable happened. Karen's son stormed outside, expecting to lean against his precious Porsche like he did every day. But when he saw the empty spot, his face twisted in panic. He ran around the lot like a headless chicken, shouting, "Where's my car? Who took my car?" His voice carried down the street, waking half the neighborhood. Finally, he came pounding on my door, fists slamming so hard I thought the wood would crack. I opened it calmly, arms crossed, and said nothing at first, just let him shout. "Where's my car? What did you do? That's a Porsche, do you know how much it's worth?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I told you 100 times not to park in my spot. Actions have consequences. You should have listened." His face drained of color, and without another word, he bolted back to his mother's house, screaming for her like a little boy who'd lost his toy. Within minutes, Karen herself was at my door, her face redder than her son's car used to be. She shrieked about calling the police, about suing me, about ruining valuable property. I let her scream, because deep down, I knew something she didn't. She no longer had the power she thought she did. Neighbors had seen everything. They knew her son had been parking in my spot for weeks. They knew she ignored every complaint. And soon, they'd know just how far I was willing to go to stand up for myself. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what I had done. Was it risky? Absolutely. Could it backfire? Maybe. But did I regret it? Not even for a second. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully, knowing that the balance of power had shifted. Karen and her son had pushed me too far, and now, they finally understood that I wasn't someone they could walk all over. That afternoon, the entire neighborhood gathered for the monthly HOA meeting, and the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone had heard the shouting, everyone knew about the missing Porsche, and everyone was waiting to see what Karen would do. She stormed into the room dragging her son behind her like an angry lawyer leading a star witness. He looked pathetic compared to his usual arrogant self, his sunglasses gone, his hair a mess, and his face twisted in a mixture of rage and panic. Karen wasted no time. The second the meeting started, she slammed her fist on the table and pointed straight at me. "This man," she barked, "has committed a crime. He destroyed my son's property, a luxury Porsche, worth more than anything he owns. He had it towed and vandalized, and I demand he be punished immediately." Her voice echoed across the room, shrill and furious, and for a second, it looked like she was ready to leap across the table. I sat calmly, hands folded, letting her tirade play out. Neighbors whispered among themselves, eyes darting between me and Karen. Finally, I stood up slowly, and the room went silent. Everyone here knows, I began, my voice steady but loud enough to carry, that her son has been parking in my spot every single day for weeks. I reported it. I asked him politely. I asked her directly. I even brought it up in this very room, and she dismissed it like it didn't matter. Meanwhile, I've been forced to park down the street, carry groceries in the rain, and I even injured myself because of it. So let me ask, whose property was really being disrespected here? Mine, or theirs? For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. One neighbor raised his hand and said, "I've seen that Porsche in his spot plenty of times." We all did. Another spoke up, "Yeah, I almost hit it one morning because it stuck out too far. I told Karen about it, and she brushed me off too." The floodgates opened. One after another, people spoke up about times they'd seen her son parked where he shouldn't be, about how Karen ignored rules for her own family while punishing others for the tiniest things. Karen's face turned redder with every word, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, but she couldn't stop the tide. The room wasn't hers anymore. Her son, desperate, jumped up and shouted, "That doesn't give him the right to destroy my car. That was a Porsche. Do you know how much it costs?" His voice cracked, and instead of sympathy, the room filled with laughter. One neighbor muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe you should have parked it where it belonged." The laughter grew, and for the first time, the spoiled brat realized the neighborhood didn't fear him or his mother anymore. The HOA board members, usually Karen's puppets, looked cornered. They exchanged nervous glances, and finally, the chairperson cleared his throat. "We've heard both sides. While we don't condone extreme actions, it is clear that repeated violations occurred. Karen, your son parked illegally in another resident's spot despite multiple warnings. That is a violation of HOA rules. Effective immediately, your family will be fined, and your son is banned from using the community parking lot for 6 months. If the Porsche requires repairs, you'll have to handle that yourselves. This meeting is closed." The look on Karen's face was priceless. For years, she had ruled these meetings like a tyrant, silencing anyone who dared oppose her. Now she sat there stunned, powerless, watching as the very people she had controlled turned against her. Her son stormed out of the room, muttering curses under his breath, but no one paid him any attention. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in ways I never expected. The Porsche, after being retrieved from the scrapyard, looked so battered it was almost unrecognizable. They tried to park it in their driveway, but the sight of its dented frame and cracked windshield was too embarrassing for the family that had built their reputation on appearances. Eventually, they covered it with a tarp, but even that didn't stop neighbors from whispering and chuckling every time they walked by. It became a symbol, a reminder of what happens when arrogance meets consequences. But the downfall didn't stop there. At the following month's HOA election, Karen tried to hold on to her presidency, but the neighborhood had had enough. People stood up, one after another, listing her abuses, fining a neighbor for having holiday lights up a day too long, writing up an elderly woman for leaving her trash bin out an extra hour, threatening families with penalties while excusing her own son's reckless behavior. By the time the votes were counted, she was out. Replaced. Removed from power completely. The woman who once strutted around like a queen was now just another resident, stripped of her crown. Life in the neighborhood changed almost overnight. Without Karen micromanaging every detail, people relaxed. Kids played outside without her nagging. Neighbors chatted in driveways without fear of being written up for loitering. And as for me, I finally had my spot back. Every time I pulled into it, the satisfaction was sweeter than I could describe. I no longer had to walk from down the street, no longer had to bite my tongue at meetings, no longer had to endure being treated like a second-class resident in my own community. And yet, the cherry on top came every time I passed Karen's house. That tarp-covered Porsche sat in the driveway like a ghost of their arrogance. I could almost hear it whispering, "This is what happens when you push too far." Neighbors would glance at it, smirk, and shake their heads. Karen avoided eye contact with me entirely, and her son stopped showing his face around the community. He knew everyone was laughing at him, and the humiliation was worse than any fine. Looking back, I realized something important. Sometimes, you can't fight arrogance with politeness. Sometimes, you can't wait for justice to come from rules or boards or people in power, because those very people are the problem. Sometimes, the only way to protect what's yours is to take action that makes the other side understand in the language they speak: force, consequences, reality. Was it risky? Yes. Was it extreme? Probably. But would I do it again? Without hesitation. Because in the end, that parking spot wasn't just a slab of asphalt. It was my home, my dignity, my right. And no spoiled kid with a Porsche, no overbearing HOA president, and no self-proclaimed neighborhood queen was going to take that away from me. The Porsche turned to scrap metal, the crown knocked off Karen's head, and the peace restored in my life all served as proof of one simple truth: when you stand your ground and refuse to be bullied, even the loudest tyrants eventually fall silent.